There's only a few real A's, and like Khamzat is a real A.
He's a savage.
I talked to DC about him, and DC said, dude, when that guy grabbed me, I realized I'm gonna have to wrestle to keep this guy off me. He's strong, man.
Yeah.
How the did that guy make 170?
I don't know, but I don't understand how he talks about going up to 205, because like you said, you got guys like Pereira, and don't get me wrong, I know they're stylistically different, but
I think he can do it. The kind of guy like Khamzat, like, man, you gotta be an Olympic caliber wrestler to scrap with that guy. The thing about his grappling is if you have that hole, he's gonna find that hole and he's gonna smother you.
for sure.
I have heard stories out of the Chimaev camp that Chimaev is training so hard and putting it on guys, elite level guys, like nothing you've ever seen before. I have heard Khamzat Chimaev wants people to go so hard with him to try to beat him and submit him and do. He's paying him. He doesn't care. I got some guys in the gym, at my gym, that know people there. They're like, man, this dude, if somebody can submit him, there's like money. The Saints got in trouble for bounty gate. Khamzat's putting a bounty on himself to make guys give him all that they have. This dude, it's different.
Chimaev's a fucking bully. And if you notice what he does in the division, he just runs and fucking hides. Oh, now I want to go to 205 and fight fucking Yuri, who's not even the fucking champ, dude. You just run and fucking hide. You did it when you train with us, and you're doing it in the division. Let me tell you about this little when I walk into a gym, do you think that I go find the little weakest man? I say, let's spar. I say, no, I go find the biggest, baddest motherfucker. I'm like, hey, I want to spar you. Every time Chimaev would walk in the gym, he would pick the smallest, lowest level pro and say, but oh, he looks like my opponent. He would pick the smallest guy. Chimaev's a fucking bully.
So this time around,
Strickland by round 5 TKO, bro. You know, the classic fucking UFC 308 when Chimaev was fighting Whitaker. The amount of people I saw. Dude, Bobby Knuckles by fucking round 5 TKO, dude. Dude, Bobby Knuckles is going to survive 4 rounds of Khamzat Chimaev and then TKO him in the 5th round. And they genuinely think Khamzat Chimaev is like Guram, dude. They talk about Khamzat's cardio like he's fucking Jose Medino, dude. I don't think he's going to drastically gas out fighting Sean Strickland. That's one reason why I'm picking him, despite the fact that I think Sean Strickland can get back up from the takedowns. He can scramble.
It could be a problem, but realistically, do I think that Sean Strickland can stuff takedown after takedown and chain wrestle and stuff? I don't know. And if I was going to be honest, no, I don't think so. I think that Khamzat could do, maybe not exactly what he did to DDP, but he can eventually, if he, plays this smart and does the safe route, he can absolutely win this fight by like ground and pound decision, or not really ground and pound, but like top control, very light ground and pound decision. Or he could submit Sean Strickland. I could easily see him getting to the back and, with that freakish level strength he has and the squeeze, that could be part of it as well. So yeah, I am so in for this event though. That's so sick. May 9th, Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev. He's on the feet for a very, very long time. I can see Strickland. If it is on the ground for long periods or even early, I'm saying Chimaev probably washes him. But I mean, you see, as of right now,
this matchup is no longer something people are guessing about or debating as a rumor. It is real now. The UFC made it official, and the middleweight division suddenly has a fight that shifts the whole conversation. Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev are officially set to meet, and the reaction came fast for a reason. These are not two fighters who solve problems the same way, build control the same way, or force the same kind of stress on the man in front of them. Their weapons are different, their tempo is different, and the second this fight became official, people across MMA started looking at it from every possible angle. Sean Strickland has a style that can look basic from the outside, right up until somebody has to stand in there with him and deal with it in real time. He keeps coming forward, stays under control, works behind his jab, and forces opponents to fight at a pace that slowly starts to wear on them. There is nothing wild about it, and that is part of why it works so well. He keeps everything compact, steady, and uncomfortable, and as the minutes pass, that pressure starts pulling mistakes out of people who felt fine early. Once he settles into his flow, rounds can begin slipping away from the other side before they fully realize realize what is happening. Khamzat Chimaev presents a completely different problem, and that contrast is what makes this fight so interesting right away. He also fights with pressure, but it shows up in another form. His pressure is not just about stepping forward and throwing on the feet. He wants contact, he wants control, and he wants to make the fight physical as early as he can. The moment he closes the gap and gets his hands on someone, the entire feel of the fight can change. A clean striking exchange can turn into wrestling without warning, and once that happens, opponents are dealing with his weight, his grip fighting, his position control, and the kind of exhausting battle that can drag them into his world. As this fight gets closer, the debate is only going to grow. One side looks at Strickland's pressure, durability, and disciplined stand-up and sees the exact kind of style that can frustrate a fighter trying to crash forward and control him. The other side looks at Chimaev's strength, wrestling, and non-stop pressure and sees the kind of threat that can destroy a striking game plan before it ever gets going. That tension is real, and it is the reason this matchup already feels bigger than a normal fight announcement. What makes it even more compelling is that the result may not come from one dramatic moment. This fight could be decided by a long series of smaller battles inside the bigger one. Every jab mattered. Every level change mattered. Every clinch exchange mattered. Each time Strickland tries to hold range and each time Chimaev tries to break through it, the direction of the fight can start to shift. That layered kind of matchup is exactly why fans and analysts keep circling back to it. At the same time, Bisping drew a hard line between beating a tough opponent and getting ready for someone like Khamzat Chimaev. In his eyes, Chimaev brings a level of physical danger that changes the entire discussion. So he is not just another difficult matchup with a couple of obvious strengths. He is an unbeaten fighter who can take over exchanges in a way that leaves opponents reacting instead of choosing what they want to do next. Bisping's point was simple. Chimaev does not just edge rounds by doing slightly better work. He often imposes himself so heavily that the other fighter ends up trying to survive. That physical control was the part Bisping kept returning to. Chimaev has built a pattern of putting opponents into bad positions and keeping them there. And once that begins, the fight can stop feeling like a clean skill for skill contest. It becomes something far more draining. That is where Chimaev becomes especially dangerous. He does not need much space to create problems. And once the momentum starts leaning his way, he can turn it into long, eye-punishing stretches that make it extremely hard for anybody to reset. Bisping also brought up Chimaev's decision fight with Dricus du Plessis, and he still came away viewing that performance in a positive light. Even though it went the distance, Bisping saw enough there to believe Chimaev can still control key moments against top competition. That mattered because it showed his style still works when the opponent is durable enough to last, experienced enough to adjust, and dangerous enough to fight back. Going long did not erase Chimaev's strength. In Bisping's eyes, it showed those strengths still matter, even when the fight gets harder and more competitive. When Bisping stripped the fight down to the main issue, he kept ending up in the same place. In his view, the whole matchup turns on whether Sean Strickland can handle Khamzat Chimaev's wrestling and non-stop pressure. More than anything else, that is where he sees the result being decided. Strickland does his best work when the fight stays standing long enough for him to settle in and start building his rhythm. Once he gets there, he can make a fight look ugly and frustrating for the other side. He keeps the jab active, keeps moving forward, and makes opponents deal with a constant stream of work that may not look flashy but becomes very effective over time. He does not need chaotic exchanges to win minutes. He needs room to box, time to build his pace, and enough control of range to keep the fight in the area where he is strong. That is exactly where Chimaev changes the picture. The Bisping's point centered on how fast everything can shift once Chimaev gets close enough to start grappling. A fight that feels manageable at striking distance can become something completely different the moment he gets his hands locked in. Once that happens, the clean boxing match Strickland wants can disappear, and the contest turns into one about balance, takedown defense, physical control, and how well a fighter can survive or recover when the exchanges get heavy. Bisping treated that as the line running through the entire matchup. If Strickland can keep the fight standing often enough, he gives himself a real chance to make his strengths matter. The jab begins landing, the pressure becomes a factor, and Chimaev is forced to spend time in a stand-up battle that may not suit him for long stretches. That is the kind of fight Strickland needs to create. He does not need to shut down every attempt forever, but he does need to stop enough of them, and he needs to make Chimaev pay when entries fail. Bedtime MMA also focused hard on the wrestling side of this matchup, but his read went a little deeper than simply saying Sean Strickland either gets taken down or he does not. In his view, Strickland probably does end up on the mat at some point. That part alone was not the biggest issue for him. The more important part was what happens after the takedown. He pointed to Strickland's ability to work his way back to his feet, and he made it sound like that side of the fight is not getting enough attention from some fans. His breakdown focused on the smaller technical details that matter once things get messy. In that view, Strickland does a good job with hand fighting, dealing with grips, rebuilding his base, and avoiding the kinds of positions that can turn a normal takedown into a long and miserable stretch underneath. Those details do not always jump off the screen right away, but against someone like Chimaev, they can mean everything. That is where Bedtime MMA drew an important line in the prediction. competition. He still expects Chimaev to have real success with the wrestling. He still expects takedowns to happen, and he is not treating that like fantasy. What he does not expect is Strickland simply getting flattened on the ground the way some of Chimaev's previous opponents were overwhelmed. He sees a more competitive fight than that, especially in the moments right after a takedown lands. His version of the matchup looks more like a repeating cycle than a one-way takeover. Chimaev gets in, forces the takedown, and tries to settle into control. Strickland responds by fighting the hand, working back to a better position, and pushing his way towards standing again. Once he gets up, the whole sequence can start over. That creates a fight built around repeated wrestling exchanges instead of one long stretch where one man controls every part of the action. There is also a conditioning angle in a fight like that, even if it is not the only thing deciding the outcome. Repeated takedowns take energy. Repeated stand-ups take energy too. If Chimaev has to keep reapplying pressure and Strickland keeps forcing resets, then the fight becomes harder on both men as it moves forward. Bedtime. MA's view leaves room for that kind of grinding contest where the wrestling still matters a lot, but the recovery after the wrestling matters just as much. That is why his breakdown stood out. He was not brushing aside Chimaev's wrestling or pretending Strickland could just walk through it with no problem. He was saying the story does not end the second the takedown lands. The bigger question in his eyes is whether Strickland can stop those takedowns from turning into long stretches of complete control. If he can do that, the fight becomes far more competitive than a lot of people seem to expect. In that kind of fight, every exchange carries weight. Chimaev has to show he can keep control once he gets it. Strickland has to show he can keep escaping without letting the grind drain him too badly. Yeah, and that repeated fight between control and recovery becomes one of the biggest parts of the matchup, and it is the reason Bedtime MMA sees this as a tougher wrestling challenge for Chimaev than some people are making it sound. When all the different breakdowns get boiled down to the main issue, this fight still comes back to one battle more than any other. Sean Strickland needs to stop the takedowns often enough, get out of bad positions quickly enough, and keep enough of the fight standing for his striking to matter. Khamzat Chimaev needs to keep pressing, keep closing the gap, and turn those moments of contact into the kind of wrestling fight that can control the night. That is why opinions on this matchup have split so sharply. Strickland has the kind of stand-up pressure that can frustrate opponents, break their rhythm, and slowly pull rounds in his favor. Chimaev has the kind of grappling threat that can erase a striking plan the moment he gets close enough to impose himself. Those strengths are not just sitting next to each other in this fight. They are crashing right into one another, and that collision is what made the matchup interesting from the start. The real appeal is not only that both men are well known, it is the way their best weapons challenge each other head on. Strickland wants room to work, room to pressure, and room to box at the pace that suits him. Chimaev wants to take that room away, create contact, and make it physical at the first chance he gets. The fighter who succeeds in creating that environment may end up deciding far more than a single exchange here or there. Now, it is your turn to weigh in. Tell us who you think wins, and tell us what part of the fight decides it, because in a matchup like this, everybody sees a different answer when they look at the clash. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay locked in for more MMA content, because this fight is only getting bigger from here, and the debate is not slowing down anytime soon. Before you go, subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next upload.